We're handing it over now to Alex, and it's a great pleasure to have Alex. Alex is one of the leading consultants on Qrops and EURBS European legislation today in Europe. He works globally, so he has worked with clients all over the world and helped them with assets in hundreds of millions of pounds. And I'm sure that we will benefit from his accumulated experience and knowledge this evening. Please.
Thank you. I always feel like I'm going to disappoint after Dan introduces me. I hope not. I hope not. Thank you for coming this evening, everybody. It's a pleasure. Darren's already covered a lot of the generic material that sits around Qrops and this whole piece around exporting a UK pension and maybe an EU pension as well for benefits, and evidently we've seen some good tax benefits. What I'm hoping to be able to do now is drill down a little bit further into Qrops, specifically if you're resident in Israel, and hopefully that's what we'll achieve. So what we're going to look at is tax benefits for Olim and returning residents, so whether you're retiring or are retired already, in Israel, or indeed your international workforce, your transient workforce that have maybe left Israel, moved to London to work in a high-tech firm or a bank or whatever it might be, and you've accumulated assets. We'll also look at UK and HMRC just in a little bit more detail, taking a slightly different spin on things. We'll cover Gibraltar again as probably primary choice for residents of Israel for pension movement of assets, but we'll also look at Malta as another jurisdiction of choice, specifically for those that maybe have greater assets, and we'll come on to why that may be applicable, and a system that we call programmed withdrawals. And then we'll also look at this whole European context, this whole freedom of capital movement, and how it applies maybe to non-UK assets if you have other European pension assets, maybe in Holland or such places. And then we'll look at what advice that we're able to give, what value we're able to offer. So I thought we'd start with a quote for anybody that recognises this gentleman, Mr. Albert Einstein. Nowhere to find the information and how to use it, that's the secret of success. So really my objective is to provide you with the information. You've already had some information, but really give you the ability to use that information, and the success we're talking about is a successful aliyah. A little bit corny, I know, but there we go. So, is everybody in the room aware of the 10-year tax rule that exists for returning citizens and new immigrants into Israel? No? Okay. Okay, so due to the re-establishment of Israel, the 60-year anniversary, there was, or still exists, the possibility of some great tax incentives to be achieved for people that have met certain conditions that exist. And this is obviously been established by the Ministry of Finance here in Israel. Some of the definitions of what would need to be considered for this to be applicable, how long you would need to be to have been resident overseas, when that was to be applicable, etc., etc. And obviously we would go through this in a lot more detail, but because of time we'll move on quite speedily. But effectively the benefit of such means, and we'll take this straight from the Ministry of Finance website, returning residents and new immigrants will be exempt from taxes for 10 years on income generated outside Israel, and that includes pension assets. So, the exportation of your UK pension fund into a Qrops could possibly mean zero income tax is generated within Israel. That is a possibility, that there is no income tax to be paid in Israel on any of this. So that's obviously a huge benefit, and I've got to say, through, as Darren alluded to and Dan's alluded to, we do business on a global context. This is amongst as good as it gets out there in the world. South Africa is another good place. We can create zero income tax in South Africa on a similar basis. India and Israel for 10 years. So it's hugely compelling to do so. What we also have to consider within this context is the UK government and HMRC and their take on things. So the question that you may kind of come to is, well, if this tax rule applies in Israel, I could get tax-free income. Why can't I just get that from a UK pension scheme? Because after all, that's an offshore asset from an Israeli point of view. Well, it's quite simple, because that is potentially possible, because where a double taxation agreement exists between Israel and another country, that could potentially happen, and the pension provider could pay out that income on a gross basis, not net of UK tax. However, quite timely for this seminar, in August, Mr. P. Weiser, I don't know if anybody knows him in the room, but he's made quite a headline recently, was taken to court by HMRC for the simple reason that HMRC looked at the double taxation agreement that exists, and because Mr. Weiser applied the 10-year tax exemption, HMRC took him to court and effectively said tax should have been paid somewhere along the line from a UK pension scheme, and because it wasn't, we are going to reclaim the tax that you've avoided for 2, 3, 4 years, whatever the time period was. So you quite simply come to the conclusion that if you're holding a UK pension asset, it's not the place to keep it if you're going to be drawing down the income from Israel, for these reasons, of course. Now, the basic rate tax within the UK is 20%, moved up to 40%, moves up to 50% for high rate taxpayers. So the minimum that is now going to be applied as an income tax rate from your pension in the UK will be 20%. Okay, so we're moving, hopefully, building up a case as to why we need to look at potentially moving it into a Qrops jurisdiction. Darren's touched on this. We look at Gibraltar. We've got a picture of Darren as our representative from Gibraltar. And Darren, as I say, has touched on a lot of this. But something that should give you comfort, because when we're talking about moving pension assets and moving it from here to there to anywhere else, we've got to be certain that the jurisdiction we're moving it to is a safe jurisdiction. And recently, very recently, actually, somebody senior in HMRC wrote a letter to the Gibraltar authorities confirming their acceptance of the tax system that exists, within Gibraltar. So the HMRC, the UK tax authorities, are happy with the 2.5% income tax that exists in Gibraltar. So effectively, you've got the choice: 20% here or 2.5% here. That's for me, it doesn't get too much easier than that, really. Even if we look at the situation of a pension fund that doesn't have the 10-year tax ruling applied to it, the tax exemption, I've done a small comparison here between the Israeli tax system and the UK tax system, and we've also looked at a male aged 60 with £100,000 in a pension fund. Now, actuarially, even with the enhancement through a Qrops of an additional 20%, the maximum income at the moment that would generate would be 36,000 shekels. So 36,000 shekels, you pay 20% tax in the UK, we pay 10% tax in Israel, worst case scenario. So just repeating these things, the ability to move your pension fund into a Qrops scheme through Gibraltar will first of all mean that the capital, the tax-free cash lump sum that you can take, moves from a position of 25% to 30%. You can also take 20% more income, lower income tax as we've pointed on, and a huge benefit of course is that we escape the 55% inheritance tax charge on death. No need to ever purchase an annuity, no compulsion, and you also get the choice of currency that you wish to invest into, any major currency. And as we've already highlighted, wide range of investment choice. So we come to another quote, one by Winston Churchill, that says there is no such thing as a good tax, and we kind of tend to agree with it here. So we look at another solution, which is Malta, the jurisdiction of Malta. Now Malta operates on a very different basis to Gibraltar. It doesn't apply a withholding tax. What Malta relies upon is the double taxation agreements that they hold across the globe, and Malta holds 58 of them. The double taxation agreement that Malta holds with Israel is signed but not yet ratified. So what that means is it's in place but you can't use it, unfortunately. But what's written into Maltese pension rules is the ability to withdraw capital sums tax-free from their pension scheme. So as with Gibraltar, we can remove 30% at retirement or when you transfer, subject to an age of age 55. So that mirrors the Gibraltar scheme, but what we then move into is a situation called programme withdrawals, and I must stress that this is for funds that are probably in excess of 500,000 sterling UK, is where this might come into its own. And this is the programme withdrawals. This is written into the trust deeds of how this works, and I won't bore you to tears with going into this. We'll put it into quite plain, simple language. Effectively, once the 30% has been removed, a further 3 years later, as long as the residual pension fund can sustain an income of 20,000 euros per annum, that calculation is made by a global actuary. Once that has been established, 50% of the residual from that point onwards can be taken as a tax-free cash lump sum each and every single year. Okay, I'll try to illustrate it maybe slightly simpler with this table. So over here we've got £750,000 coming into a Qrops pension scheme. We take out, in this example, 25% as our initial tax-free cash lump sum. Within this table, I've added in the maximum annual income that we could take as well potentially. So therefore, we see that after 3 years from the first withdrawal, we get to this position here. The fund required for this particular individual to create an income of 20,000 euros per annum would be 408,163. Gives us an excess fund of 188,257. 50% of that means that we can withdraw a further £95,000 tax-free. And we get to that position each and every single year. In this, we've also assumed a growth rate of 7%. But what we get to is a position where we can effectively move money into Israel in this situation in a very tax efficient or a tax-free manner. If we factor in the income as well, which you could pay tax on, then effectively we can bring in almost the full fund amount, 700,000 from the 750,000, very tax efficiently. Or if you just want to take the capital and bring it in tax-free, completely tax-free, 750,000, we could bring in 450,000 tax-free over a period of 10 years. So for clients and those of you with larger assets, that is a very, very efficient solution that could be utilised. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, we can discuss it on an individual basis, of course. Some of the highlights of the Maltese scheme. Actually, it's identical to the Malta scheme, other than these large capital withdrawals that we're able to make, and no withholding tax of 2.5%. But really, the utilisation of the Maltese scheme for us is the capital withdrawals until this double taxation agreement is ratified with Israel. The reason that we selected Sovereign to partner us in this event is quite simply because they are the largest independent trust company, which gives some comfort, but also because Sovereign have both trusts. So they have both a Malta trust and a Gibraltar trust. So if that double taxation agreement ever does get ratified, then we can switch between the two quite seamlessly and at no cost.
No cost at all.
There we go, you heard it here first. So we move on to this overarching framework, the EU Freedom of Capital Movement, which has borne the Qrops and particularly the UK pension movement. But there are other countries inside of the EU, of course, that this applies to, and these are some of the schemes that we know we are able to move. If you have assets in other countries, please talk to us. We will be happy to have a look at it. With each individual country that we're looking at assets from, we need to consider the individual pension rules of the particular country. So some are more complex than others. We've focused on the UK market initially because it's the easiest, and certainly they're the most open to this. The Netherlands, as I say, is a possibility where we can move this, and we get similar, very, very similar benefits. Of course, the tax charge on income from a pension scheme in Holland could be up to 52% for a particularly large fund. So again, the tax treatment applies, and so on and so forth. Belgium, Germany, particular different pension schemes that we can move. Switzerland is another, and Ireland, and so on and so forth throughout the EU. We're able to do so. So why us for this type of business? Well, we work based in London. We operate in London. We also work locally with independent planners here. So you've also always got access to somebody on the ground that's going to be able to give you this advice. Stephen, the Managing Director of our network, will explain a little bit more about our global reach, but we operate in over 43 countries now and have significant client assets under management. That's the strapline really. We were established as the brand to bring quality, qualified Qrops advice, helping expats globally pay less tax and maximise their pension returns. That's the objective. Hopefully that's what we're going to deliver for you. Part of what we do really is not also look at, okay, this is the tax reason, this is why we need to move it. The first part of the process is to understand your pension asset. What are you holding in the UK? Because once we understand that, we can give you advice with regards to that. Is it in a defined benefit scheme? Is that scheme well funded? What guarantees are you giving up as a result? And from there we can make an informed decision as to whether or not the movement of that pension asset is the right thing to do. All of our advice that we give has to be approved by the trustees that we send it through to as well. So their requirement by UK law from HMRC is also that we send a fully compliant report to them on the tax benefits, etc. for the movement of the pension asset. So I'll leave you with the last quote on this, and it's from Jane Austen, and it says, "A large income is the best recipe for happiness I ever heard of." And that's what we're trying to achieve, is by reducing tax, increasing your income. And that's me. Any questions at all, anybody? Whilst we're waiting? No? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's holding up the double taxation treaty between Malta and Israel. Is it Malta, Israel, or they?
I don't actually know. I should know the answer to this, but I don't. Apparently, it has been signed for probably going on a year now, maybe slightly longer, but it has not been ratified. The expectation as to when that is, nobody can give us an answer on. We've seen some large accountancy firms this week, and they're in exactly the same situation. We don't quite understand what the issues are. The agreement's obviously been agreed and signed, but which is why we have the importance of a dual trust company that can operate the two. But
Can you switch from one jurisdiction to the other?
correct,
Without cost even.
without cost. Yeah.
Without even cost. Yeah.
Yeah.
So because it's it's in the same firm. So Sovereign has in Gibraltar and in Malta, so you can just move. But at the moment, we have to look at Malta as if you're paying full tax. There's no. So anyone who wants to take an income from that fund will have. It's not recommended to go to Malta yet.
No, only for large capital withdrawals, as we described.
If you're taking, if you're taking the funds out, and you have, and you can contain the €20,000 a year drawdown, then it's worth it to move to Malta. Okay. Well, so thank you very much, Alex. That was great.